Polo, Mr. Erdell, and others have offered to potentially provide funds to help us get through that technical review of this. Given the way our ability to accept funds works, we have to be really careful about any organization saying, here, I want to fund this, right? So instead, the district sets what we're going to use the funds for, and we can take donations. So we're just being very careful about that. That's why this is coming first, and funding, if it's still appropriate. So, yeah. If it's still appropriate, would presumably come in September, and we could talk about it then. So, and we've spoken to Mr. Erdell. He understands, I think, what's going on. So, and why we're doing that.
Yeah, so the reason why we want to involve consultants is because the real question is, what chunk of this do we want to start with? What's cost effective? So is zone 1 by itself, is that the right ticket? Maybe it is, but maybe it makes more sense to have zones 1 and 2 happen at the same time. So that's what we're going to try to find out with our consultants.
I would recommend you have the board ask a few questions and take it to public comment and then bring it back for further discussion at the board.
Okay. Board members, any questions or comments?
Yes, I'll start. So first of all, thanks to the committee. I mean, I know in addition to public comment, we've had all of the studies, you know, AECOM, the region. I'm assuming that body of work also informed this potential solution as well as the public comment. So that totality of that is the underpinning of this proposal. So
yeah, if I may, real
yes.
quick, while you're forming on that. In fact, part of our discussion was around that, and we recognized the technical committee's discussion was this is something Tom would have brought up were he here, because for instance, the work that Stantec did on gravity feed lines, they could all be reused here, right? Because many of those lines are going to go down those same paths, right. And particularly zone 1 and 2, you're just using what Stantec already did.
Thanks. So and the other thing I'm wondering, and maybe this is getting too far ahead because we first need the board procedurally, right, to say proceed with analysis of this proposal. Is that correct? Is that what we're giving direction on tonight?
So we're going to kind of adopt this as a general approach and
for further study.
Work on a contract.
Right, for further study to do the 30% design and budget estimating and see what it tells us. Correct. Is that right? Okay. So I'll still ask the question anyway. I'm curious for the portion that we're considering to remain on advanced on-site, if that falls under district for replacing the advanced on-site, you know, how would that look? I know that's the next level of detail, but for instance, as folks' properties come up and they need to be replaced, is that a district activity or would that remain the responsibility of the individual homeowner, or do we know that?
Yeah, so there were 2 discussion points on that. The first one was it's the property owner's responsibility today, it would remain their responsibility, but we did have a conversation about, is there a way to strike a contract with somebody that could do multiples, right? As opposed to
and
every
financing
individual
or
client,
anything like that.
yeah,
right.
property owner trying to fund their own. Maybe there's a way to get better pricing by doing many at once.
We've talked about that before, and I guess I would ask to or consider, is that an issue with the water board or a negotiating point with the water board? Perhaps it's a better way to frame it.
Could be. I didn't talk to them specifically about that.
So what we'd be looking at if we move forward with this is Regen. I'm assuming it would be Regen doing the 30, moving forward with a 30% design and cost analysis, similar to what we did with the Stantec gravity only.
Correct.
Okay. Those are my questions.
And I might add, in early discussions with Regen, they've also talked about doing some first round of what's also often referred to as value engineering to say, hey, yes, I'll spec this plan out for you, but, you know, completely making it up, you know, those 2 that are, they're getting up there. If these parcels down here were included in zone 2, you would get a big bang for your buck. So you would look at that sort of thing as well.
Right. Well, we'd be looking for recommendations, right, on either by zone, or this is the best way to bundle the zones to most
As well
effectively
as-
get the work done.
You might look at this and say, you know, the top part of zone 1 makes sense for gravity, but maybe the bottom part of zone 1, if you're going to do all that step around there, makes more sense for step or something like that. But the intent was to have him look at this in 30% design this, but as he's going through that process, offer some recommendations as to how we might make it more effective and cheaper in the end for residents and property owners.
Okay, and one more question. So I know we're envisioning looking at collection only, but would your recommendation be we proceed with the regen analysis of this to 30% and then wait to see what the results are before we talk about citing for treatment? Or is that something that can then, I don't know, I'm just asking the question when we talk about treatment.
I would look to your board to say, hey, technical committee, while that's being worked on, you go out and look at treatment or look at sites, or maybe it's not the technical committee you want to have looking at that, but have somebody get looking at that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right, those are my questions.
Thank you. Director Kennedy?
Yes, thank you, technical committee. This is great, something we've been looking forward to. So I had the question, I had the question about your comment earlier about the monitoring wells with this respect to the green areas, which are potentially advanced on site. So if I understand what you're saying, the green areas, which we're right now showing as potentially going to advanced on site, the answer to whether or not we can do that is going to be dependent upon us drilling 3 more wells.
Partially driven because they want to know what the data says. Yes.
Okay.
So thank you for bringing that up. You can kind of see this is all of it right at the bottom of this yellow where it turns green, right? And that's Santa Barbara. So somewhere right in that area, we would put the first one, the second one down here at the bottom of the district, and the third one basically straight across from that one right in here somewhere. So they'd understand from that the real impact that the small lots are having, the real impact on the other side of the creek, the west side of the creek, and then what's happening as things leave the district.
Okay, good. That was going to be my question, is the placement of these wells. Because the one well that we have that's up at the top there on the west side over by Steel, I mean, is that data, I mean, are we good, or is that still valid? Are they willing to consider that? Because right now that's showing where, that the nitrates are within the range.
Right. So for those who haven't been following this, maybe I can. So we've got 2 existing wells. One of them's right up here in the upper left-hand corner. That one is under the maximum contaminant levels. It's a 0.3 or 3 out of 10. The other one sits right over here, about here somewhere. And that's right at MCL, 10 out of 10. So clearly they wouldn't say, sure, we could talk about advanced on-site over here. And that's one of the reasons they know, again, remember the creek kind of runs this way, right? So they're curious to see what's happening as water flows down the creek, and we'll see what's happening subsurface. And again, just if I can, remember, we're monitoring at about 100 feet, right? So this is the shallow groundwater, right? We're not going down to the level, for instance, I forget how deep you said they were, but the several hundred feet lower where we're getting drinking water from currently. But as we may recall from when the Water Quality Board was here, everything eventually works its way down, right? It's just a question of how fast and how far. And so that's one of the reasons they're anxious to see more data in those areas.
Okay, that was mainly my question, and then I agree. I would like to. I definitely would like to see us proceed with regen, and especially the value engineering. Because I would like to see us proceed with regen, and especially with the idea of having some value engineering in there, so that we actually have something that's comparable to the Stantec design to consider. So that's it. Thank you though for the work.
Dr. Parks?
Well, yeah, I would like to thank you guys for the hard work you've done on this. I guess my concerns are, one is we're hiring another engineering firm to come in. I don't want to be bound by this so much if someone from Regen or another engineering firm comes in and says, well, I think that on-site, or not on-site, but STEP could work over here and over here, and being wed to a gravity system, then I just think we may be getting the cart before the horse just a little bit. If we adopt this, how strongly must we stick to it? Because if Tristan comes down and says, well, yeah, I mean, we can do a communal step here, we can do this over here, and in the long run, it would be better it would be cheaper for the residents, then I don't want to be bound by something like this if adopted.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to be bound by this, to be
Okay.
clear. This is a starting point, right? And it appears reasonable based on what we've heard from people in the past about what they'd like to see, what collection could look like. But if again, if just oversimplifying, but if in that lower right-hand corner, if you came back and said, oh, that should be step, and I don't know, all of zone 2 should be step, your board and the public is going to get to hear that and talk about it, and then we'll take something presumably to a 60% design, right? It's not really until we go from 30% design, it's kind of, okay, here's the pretty good figure from a cost perspective for what we put together. Here's what it's going to cost. You want to get down to what it's really going to cost, you go to 60% design and then final design. And once you get to 60, Director Parks, that's when you're kind of locked in. Unless you're going to spend a bunch of money to have somebody redo.
So I just worry a lot about ongoing operation and maintenance.
Correct.
It's like, okay, this is easy. Okay, we got great collection. Okay, we have this. Oh, this is wonderful. And now we have all this in one place. Now, what are we going to do with it? And how long? How are we going to treat that?
Correct.
So I'd kind of like to look at that as we go forward. So I just know with the step, we have a lot of the treatment is done on site.
Yep.
Where we have the effluent to deal with. So that's my concerns.
Understood.
Yeah, so I think the intent is for this to be a starting point for our next round of trying to understand how to solve our wastewater treatment issues. And we have total flexibility at this time. So we think this will get things going. Excuse me.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
So the premise or the rationale behind the gravity in the dense, smaller parcel downtown core is because it can't accommodate step?
Thank you. My point I should have made, yeah, the smaller lots most likely cannot accommodate step. And the reason for that is, and I had some verification from this just earlier this week. So when you put a step tank in the ground, it's basically a holding tank, right, of pollutants, potential pollutants. And by law, that has to have a 25 minimum foot setback from not the water line that goes to your house, but the conveyance line. And many of these lots don't have room to do that. And so you're going to have to put probably gravity in for several of them. Another discussion that often comes up related to that is, well, can't we use some public right-of-way to do that? And the reality is that gets really dicey because you're going into the street, and that's where the water lines run, right, closer to the street. So you probably won't be able to get 25 feet away from those water lines for all of those parcels. So that was the other reason that they were discussed as part of Zone 1 because of that setback. Yeah, so there you have it.
Thank you.
So do I go public comments?
Yeah.
Do we have any? Oh, we have much. All right, Tom Nelson, go ahead.
Okay. Well, first off, I want to thank you for accepting my conceptual idea and looking at it. It was, again, just a concept, but you've incorporated a lot of it into this. And I think there's a way with the staff to even work around some of those other things. In some of the areas over where I live, anywhere over San Marcos and along there, the main street and the alleys that are there are all owned privately. They're not public street. Some of them they go from public to private. So some of that can be done. And there's an advantage for anybody that would be going to a step system to want to incorporate that into it and give you the right way to do that. I mean, there's a win-win if you go that way. The one thing I see from that, which if you put that up there, I think is important. It's not looking for a single treatment point. It's only looking at a single collection point. And so anywhere else in my concept, there were collection or a treatment point up here at the church on the land that we own, a smaller one to handle, break the big thing up, the big elephant, into small parts that you can eat. And you can treat it at different places. There's been discussion, and there will be, about doing some of it over by the church, or the school, I mean. And so there are different potentials that don't have to be a huge acreage. They can be smaller to fit what's coming there. The gravity idea may be what we need for the downtown area, because you're looking at a lot of stuff with the restaurants and the hotels. Again, you're getting everything with that. So that's going to need a full treatment type plant. It won't work like the others do with a smaller, easier type thing. But I think you brought in a lot of things that I have suggested, others have suggested, brought up, and I commend you for taking a wider look at it. And I think that's what the public wants to see. And so thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hertel.
Good evening, everybody. I think we're all read the letter from Polo. No, you didn't read it, Paul? Oh, okay. Well, there's a whole letter here, which I'm not going to read right now, but I'll give it to all of you. But basically, it's our offer to fund up to $75,000 of additional study based on your concept here, which I think you guys have done a lot of great work, Brad, and you and Tom. But one of our conditions was that we do have the value engineering component baked into it that you're talking about, so that if there is a better configuration, it's on the table for the board and the community to consider. So that's in here for you. Hopefully your next board meeting, you guys will have this on your agenda to accept our grant, reach the money the next day, and off to the races with getting this further information. And I'm not against STEP or gravity or any of them. I just want to make sure we have good expert advice and telling us, the facts and the numbers and the pros and the cons. I do think if you do gravity here, you still could put those big tanks like Dunn School has and do that secondary treatment option. It's kind of like STEP, but on a large scale, so you don't have to rule that off. There's a number of different options. Last week, I was trying to help one of my very best veterinarians, other than Dr. Parks is a veterinarian as well, but this one, Dr. Erin Byrne, lives right around here, and she works her tail off, and she's wanted a pool. She was told she could have a pool at her house. Well, her lot's very constrained. So I said, I have a little experience, so I've been helping her, and Paul Jensen, who was at the county environmental health on the Los Olivos project since 1992, up until 7 years ago. He's one of the consultants now. He said now he's solving problems, and he was trying to help us with this plot. And he said he thinks STEP is a big part of the solution for Los Olivos. He's a guy that spent many years in this thing. So I think that's a good vote of confidence for part of it. So anyways, we have it all written up here for you guys to consider. Hopefully at your next board meeting, we just want to see the proposal, the scope before we approve it, so we know that it's going to give the community what information you guys need. And I do believe that it's very, very important that we have the most economical local option available to us, because that's the whole component of local control of Los Olivos. And you remember there was forces years ago when we were trying to form that didn't want us to form. And so those forces are still there. So that's why we need something cost effective and reasonable and the community can consider.
Thank you. Mike Brady.
I'm very encouraged by this move by the board, and I would strongly suggest you adopt it. We've been floundering, and I think that you need a plan, even a skeleton of a plan, which this surely is. It only allows us, as time moves forward, to address the critical issues of types of systems, steps, what things need to be tweaked and what things don't. And those all get ferreted out over time if you have a plan. So I'm very encouraged by this, and it seems to be a very logical, straightforward approach. And it'll get tweaked, it'll get modified. Maybe some things won't work, maybe they will. That's the process, and we're starting it here tonight. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rohr.
Hey, so I was so upset because I was reading something and Mr. Mr. Ross wrote that I written something that was critical, and I don't want to be critical. Everyone says I'm critical. My wife, my kids, my family, people at work. I'm not critical. I was just offering advice, you know. But so no, really, in seriousness here, I love what you guys are saying. These are great ideas. I want to make just a couple of technical notes. First off, I don't think you can adopt something and say, oh, we're going to give this contract or adopt anything now because you didn't notice it for that. You noticed it for a discussion. So you may want to bring it back next, like 2 weeks from now and adopt whatever it is you're adopting here and adopt the donation that could go for the study and set forth what the study would be and just wrap that all into one. So that's just sort of technical. The other thing that's bigger that I think you want to cure before that is we have kind of a problem taking out the school and Maddie's from the plan, right? Because you don't actually have authority to do that. That's put in with LAFCO, and to drop them out, you're gonna have to go back to LAFCO. Now, I understand why you want to do that. Those are the two biggest users, and they'll have the two biggest assessments under the Prop 218 vote, so they'll have the most power in the vote. And you're expecting that they're going to vote no. So I understand why you'd like to pull them out, but then you need to go and pull them out and do that through a transparent process. The downside with pulling them out is you've said, oh, there's a crisis here and we need to put everything into a sewer. So it's hard on the one hand to say, well, the two biggest producers were taken out, but we do need a sewer. But you'll confront that. I know you can. So I would take that out. I would not use this plan, putting it into the record and then adopting it. I just think it's open for attack because you're sort of randomly, without a rational basis, pulling out two stakeholders that belong there. And then I would just back up what I think Vice President Ross said, and certainly Director Parks, and also Mark Hertel saying, hey, let's leave this sort of studies open. Like, we don't know at this point, right, whether it should be all step, partially step, who knows, right? None of us have done the engineering. And so let's leave that open for the next folks and study the generous offer. Thank you so much. Good work.
Thank you. Okay, so mine.
Got two on Took Anna Marie got.
Anna Marie, go ahead.
Good evening, board members. Well, I was just going to say exactly what Mr. Rohr said, which was, one, you haven't noticed this for any sort of adoption. It is only to be considered. And two, I'm really confused as to why we would actually exclude Maddie's or Los Olivos Elementary School. Unless you have a document from LAFCO that says that you can do that, you should not be doing that. And from my understanding, both of these properties are within the district, and we don't have anything from LAFCO that excludes them. So moving forward, you need to include both of these in the plan until you've got written confirmation that they are going to be excluded. And just saying that you're going to have a conversation with, the folks up at the Los Olivos Elementary School to see what their plans are, that doesn't cut it. And the idea that Maddie's already has their own solution, that still doesn't cut it because they are in the district. And until they are excluded from the district, you cannot move forward with this little plan. Thank you.
So I guess we're going to come up with zones 7 and 8, aren't we? And they will be in the plan.
Yeah, one more on mine.
I just have.
Hold on. We have an online guy. Go first.
Yeah, Cecile.
Hi, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. Thank you, board, for having this meeting and presenting these collection zones and projects. And I just wanted to share a couple of experiences we have at the water board. And I apologize. I'm Cecile Blunkarte with the Regional Water Quality Control Board. And one of them does have to do with Maddie's Tavern. That property worked really hard to with the water board to obtain a permit there to do wastewater discharges, and we wanted to ensure that the Los Olivos sanitary or sewer system would be successful. And so their permit currently states that, well, we issued them a permit contingent on them connecting to the sewer system within 2 years of it being built. So that is something that's already, required of Maddie's Tavern. Otherwise, if they don't, then they run the risk of having their permit pulled and no longer being able to discharge. And secondly, a step system. We have some step systems. That in our region, and I will have to say, it's almost like an HOA. We're having problems with the step, the actual tank being on private property, where the private property owners don't want to, or for some reason don't pump their tanks. And because of this, the service district is not allowed to go on their property and properly manage those step systems. So putting that into the right of way actually seems like a potential solution, but I just thought I'd bring that to your attention to maybe think about how maybe you ensure that you do have the CSD does have access to those tanks when a property owner is not able to pump or maintain that tank.
Thank you. Point. Go ahead.
My understanding of what you presented wasn't that Maddie's or the school were being excluded out. My understanding was you sat and decided which zone they would be in through this whole development. Am I correct or am I wrong?
You're correct.
Okay, so we're not cutting them out. It's a matter of, we're just not sure which one they'll fit into the best.
Or they may be their own zone.
Or they may, yeah, exactly. I mean, we're just not sure where to put them at the moment, because this is not a solid D plan. This is a plan that's going to be looked at to decide whether or not this has basic value, and it can go from there and then be tweaked as it needs to be to make the best plan we want. Is that correct? Am I right with that?
I think so.
Because I think it's easy to get that lost in some of the conversation, and I think that's important, because it's not the plan, it's just a plan.
Okay, could we have your comment first and you second?
Sorry, Lisa Kondrasik in the district. I think part of the confusion, and maybe you guys want to amend this on the site, is because it says inclusion to be determined. It makes it seem like it's not which zone they fit into, it's whether or not they're included. So I think that might be what's causing the confusion on that issue.
Thank you. Mike, go ahead.
Just to layer on top of what Tom said, which he said it, there's a very clear, defined district line. It's clear that the school and Maddie's Tavern are included in the district. It's just where and how do they fit, which we cannot determine now, and that will be determined.
It will happen. Mark, go ahead.
Just to comment on that, I do think perhaps the idea of Maddie's as a zone is important, because if they are in phase one or zone one, and if they decide they don't want to spend the money, their vote will be so heavy that they could kill the thing for the whole town if they don't know. So I do think putting them in a future zone is probably prudent. If you're, I think the way it works is where you go to assessment vote for the zone benefit. Could be wrong, but you definitely don't want them to decide they don't want to pay for all this money and then it kills it for the whole town. So I think strategically you got to do it correctly, but I think you're on something for the future or something.
Yeah, thank you.
Because I think it's based on assessed property value, which they're probably assessed property value is probably equivalent for the whole rest of the day.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this gets pretty complicated as you're suggesting. So we're thinking through all this stuff and we're just getting started, but I think we're on the right track. Okay. Now, I don't think we were planning to do any formal vote on this. Is that right?
No, it was just for discussion and input. I think what staff is looking for is some direction related to, should we work on a contract to have somebody move this to the next step? That contract would come back presumably next month if there's time to put it together.
Okay. Do we need to vote on that?
So you think direct
Direct
staff to do what he just said.
Yeah. You are so directed.
I think,
Yeah, I think.
but including the value and, including the language that you heard from the board, and I think echoed by the public on the value engineering. I think making sure that they understand we're looking for recommendation on Maddie's and the school and where they would fit. Right, in the zone, which zone or not zone, but method.
And I would add, and this may be premature, but I would add if any cursory numbers or ideas about what the ongoing maintenance and operation would look like for the various zones, I think that would be really helpful. Again, I understand we're just looking at 30% design, but that's getting it in and
Right.
constructed as one, maintaining and taking care of it after the fact is equally important.
Yeah, we have to end up with something that you all are gonna vote for, so
Right.
all of these things are very important.
And I have just one question.
Let's have her go first, go ahead.
Phoebe Ziegler, I live in the district. I would like to ask just some clarifying questions if I could about zone 6. And I don't know if these are directed to the board, Director Ross, or to Mr. Savage, but with 6, am I to understand that advanced onsite should a parcel today, while additional data will be collected about 6? Would that mean that onsite would then come in, work with that property? And I heard the discussion between Directors Kennedy and Palmer, that you perhaps would put multiple properties together if that were the case to get some kind of cost efficiencies for the landowners. But am I to understand that if they're operating just fine today, there wouldn't be any trigger of any involvement from advanced onsite? Is that correct?
I think the Regional Water Quality Control Board wants, excuse me, everyone to have some treatment going on besides septic.
Yes.
So I think they would have to bring the advanced on-site onto their property.
I should clarify. I'm not saying, is this an out for zone 6? I'm asking instead, while you're focusing on whatever zones go first, assuming it isn't going to be 6, because it's unlikely that it should be, that our zone would kind of just hang out and only have to work with advanced against them to fix a problem. Or is a switch get flipped at some point if this would be adopted, where everyone in 6 has to work with advanced on-site post step? That's what I'm trying to understand. How that, what is that mechanism?
Yeah, so I think the answer is we don't know.
Okay.
And we are totally open to saying, we're gonna work on zone 1 and 2 and 6. We might say that.
Sure.
So again, it's just up in the air until we get our facts together and figure out what makes sense.
Okay.
It also sounds like zone 6 is gonna be dependent. If we get wells in, monitoring wells, then 6 is gonna have a lot to depend on that. If 6 has really high levels, there's probably gonna be more
Yeah, we might do something
immediate
differently.
change
Yeah.
than if the water quality looks great there, then I would say we'd want to put it off because it's not gonna be an immediate problem.
Yeah. So again, just trying to get data and figure out what makes sense.
What
Go
I
ahead.
wanted to ask is, since you brought up the point, or was brought up somewhere, that you can't put the step tank within 25 feet of the conveyance water line, is the location of the main water lines that would be affected by that going to be in this study, so that you can actually look and say, well, we can't put it here, but we could put it here, so that people have an idea. I'm a believer that if the plan is right and it works for people, they're gonna wanna cooperate to do it, and the district, in my mind, should own all the equipment and do the maintenance. That way it's out of their hands, and all they're providing is the electricity that goes to run the thing. And there's a selling point in marketing for that, which means their hands stay clean, and they don't have to worry about it, it's being done. And it's just a matter of selling the idea. But I want to find out, or what I think is important to find out is, are the water lines that are there that are providing the water in, they're gonna compromise what can or can't be done within that distance. So I think we should know that as part of that plan.
Yeah, excuse me, certainly for zone one, because that's why we're saying we can't do step there.
Right.
But as far as the other properties that are relatively large, I don't think we're expecting any kind of problem in terms of the setbacks. Is that fair to say, Guy?
Yes, I don't
Well,
understand
Depends
why.
on the
But
lot.
I think he's talking
Yeah.
about step one though.
I'm talking about.
You're talking about
That's why
other
step
Talking about-
one wouldn't de facto. We saw it in a downtown business area where it worked fine. And it did work, and it was, we saw it, some of us. And so it's not that it can't be done, it's just that, is that what we want to do? Is that the most practical thing?
So our information is that it can't be done in some of the lots in Los Olivos. So if that's not correct, we'll work that out.
Okay.
But that's what we have been told.
But hopefully that's why by getting more engineers down and doing more, we can get that. So hopefully with regen, they can see where the water lines are. Blah, blah, blah. We can talk to environmental health services and say, okay, yeah, I mean, truly it's 25. There's nothing you can do about that. You can't wrap this, you can't
Or
put in
water purveyor.
columns here, you can't do whatever. These are, so.
They've already answered that. No, you can't go inside the 25.
Right, so it would have to then go to a public right of way and have communal tanks if you were to do it. Which it sounds like Cecile said that that's an option. Possible.
Yeah, so we'd love to answer all your questions. We just don't know everything yet. So we'll be working on it. Okay, are we done with 7?
Does Guy have enough direction?
Do you have enough direction? I think so. Do you?
Probably too many directions, really.
Okay, yes, I believe I do. So what I've written to myself, just to kind of recap it here. So general direction stack to work on a contract that is based on this, that includes value engineering and recommendations on Maddox Tavern and Los Olivos School, as well as some of the other parcels. So that's the point of the value engineering. If possible, include both construction and maintenance costs for whatever system is looked at here. And then to the extent possible, examine water lines and existing water conveyances as part of that study.
Sounds good to me. Anything else from the board?
I think all that will meet all those requirements as well as far as having an open mind going into it.
Okay,